The fog hung heavy over Balmoral Castle on the morning of November 18th, 2025, wrapping the Scottish estate in a grey shroud that reflected the sombre mood inside its ancient walls. King Charles sat alone in his private study, once used by Queen Victoria, and generations of monarchs who had faced decisions that shaped nations staring at a single sheet of paper whose formal legal language concealed the revolutionary nature of its content. An instrument of abdication prepared in absolute secrecy by constitutional lawyers sworn to confidentiality, a document that would end his reign barely 3 years after it began. The decision had not come suddenly, though its finalization had accelerated in recent weeks. Charles had ascended the throne in September 2022 at age 73, already the oldest person to assume the British crown after waiting longer than any heir in the nation's history, spending decades preparing for a role that always seemed just out of reach. When it finally came, following his mother's death at Balmoral, he embraced it with a determination and energy that surprised those who doubted his stamina for the demands of modern monarchy. But after 3 years of relentless duty, the toll had become impossible to ignore as subtle health issues emerged: lingering fatigue despite rest, a persistent cough resistant to antibiotics, and joint pain that made standing through long ceremonies increasingly difficult. Initially, his doctors attributed the symptoms to age and stress, recommending rest and lighter schedules. But when routine scans in September revealed abnormalities requiring further investigation, the situation grew more serious. The diagnosis, delivered privately in early October, was not immediately life-threatening, but it was progressive and required treatment incompatible with the demands of his constitutional role. Charles faced the prognosis with the stoicism shaped by decades of public service and personal trials. He had endured the collapse of his first marriage under brutal media scrutiny, weathered the shock and grief following Diana's death, survived years of being portrayed as an eccentric heir impatiently waiting for a crown many believed he did not deserve, rebuilt his reputation slowly, married the woman he loved despite fierce public opposition, and finally ascended the throne with genuine support. The idea of surrendering the crown so soon felt like cosmic cruelty, a final twist in a life already marked by humiliation and disappointment. But Charles remained dutiful above all. He understood the constitutional monarchy better than almost anyone. After 7 decades of studying its demands and limitations, he knew the crown required not only symbolic presence, but active engagement, sharp mental clarity, and the physical stamina to sustain the relentless schedule that kept the institution relevant. He had watched his mother serve tirelessly until her final days and admired her resolve. Yet he also recognized how her refusal to abdicate had created difficult moments in her later years, when age diminished her capacity, but duty compelled her forward. The constitutional lawyers had reviewed the precedent with care. Britain had not witnessed a voluntary abdication since 1936, when Edward VIII relinquished the throne for personal reasons that placed private desire above national responsibility, an event so traumatic it reshaped the monarchy and remained a cautionary tale nearly 90 years later. What Charles contemplated was fundamentally different, grounded not in personal gratification but in medical necessity, a distinction critical to how the act would be perceived and whether the institution could withstand it. Throughout the deliberation, he confided in only a select few: his private secretary of 22 years, who understood his mind better than most, and the Archbishop of Canterbury, whose spiritual guidance had long helped him navigate the burdens of kingship. His constitutional role made him essential to any discussion of abdication, as did the involvement of 2 senior constitutional experts, whose absolute discretion and legal insight were critical to navigating the complex political and procedural landscape, and, eventually, William, whose reaction would determine whether the path was even possible. The conversation with his eldest son had taken place 3 weeks earlier in this same study, during what the public believed was a routine private visit to Balmoral. Charles had laid out the medical realities plainly, showing William the documentation, explaining the prognosis and treatment requirements, and watching his son's face shift from shock to denial, then grief, and finally reluctant acceptance. William had begged him to seek more opinions, to explore every treatment that might allow him to continue. But once all alternatives had been exhausted and the medical consensus remained unchanged, he was forced to reach the same conclusion. Continuation was impossible. What followed was the most difficult negotiation either had ever faced. At 43, William had expected at least another decade, perhaps 2, before inheriting the crown. He had 3 young children, the youngest only 7, and Catherine was still recovering from her own recent health struggles, regaining strength but not yet fully restored. The thought of becoming king while his children were still in school and his wife remained fragile felt overwhelming. Yet duty, the force that had shaped both their lives since childhood, allowed no room for personal preference. Camilla's discovery of the truth unfolded in the worst way imaginable by accident. Returning early from a hospital visit because of a migraine, she entered Balmoral through a side entrance to avoid fuss, and as she walked toward the private apartments, she heard voices from Charles's study. The door was slightly ajar, and Charles's voice, weighted with emotion, drifted into the hallway. "I have no choice. The treatment protocol is incompatible with the demands of the role. I must step aside while I can do so with dignity." Camilla froze, blood turning cold as the implications hit her. William's voice followed, discussing timelines, announcements, transitions, and constitutional requirements. They were planning an abdication. Her husband, who had waited a lifetime to be king, who had endured decades of preparation and criticism, who had ruled for less than 3 years, and he had told her nothing. She listened as they spoke about informing her at the appropriate moment, as though she were an obstacle rather than a partner. When she finally pushed open the door, both men fell silent, their expressions confirming everything she had heard. The confrontation that followed, according to those who heard the raised voices through the study's heavy doors, was volcanic. Camilla's fury was absolute and overwhelming. She unleashed her anger on Charles for excluding her from a decision that would redefine her life and identity, demanding to know how long he had been planning it and how many people had been consulted while she was deliberately kept in the dark. She accused him of cowardice, of abandoning the responsibility they were meant to share, of caring more about legacy than partnership. Charles tried to explain the medical realities, to make clear that this was necessity rather than choice. But Camilla was beyond reason. For 20 years she had fought for acceptance, endured endless comparisons to Diana, withstood public judgment that ranged from grudging tolerance to open hostility. She had finally secured her place as queen consort, begun shaping the role, and felt she was earning her place only to have it snatched away after barely 3 years. She would go from queen to queen dowager, from consort to widow of a former king, a demotion in everything but technical title. What enraged her most was the timing. Had Charles reigned a decade or more, abdication due to declining health might have felt understandable, but 3 years felt like a cruel joke, denying her the chance to contribute meaningfully to the monarchy. The charities she championed, the causes she supported, the careful public image she cultivated, all would be diminished by the brevity of her tenure and the manner of its end. Her anger toward William was even more intense. She accused him of pushing Charles toward abdication, of being eager to assume the throne, of placing his own timeline above his father's well-being. The accusations were unfair, and she likely knew it, but anger seeks targets, and William was standing before her. He tried to defend himself, explaining that he had argued against abdication and urged his father to exhaust every alternative, but Camilla wanted none of it. In William she saw the person who would benefit from her loss, the one who would rise while she fell. She saw in him the man who would rise as she descended, whose wife would become queen while she faded into a historical footnote. The confrontation ended with Camilla storming out of the study, retreating to her private rooms, and refusing to see or speak to Charles for 3 days. The household moved cautiously through the castle, aware that something catastrophic had happened yet unsure of the details. Meals were delivered to separate rooms, and schedules quietly rearranged to avoid accidental encounters. The King and Queen of England were not speaking, and the tension seeped into every corridor of Balmoral. Racked with guilt, Charles buried himself in the bureaucratic work of finalizing abdication plans, perhaps finding comfort in paperwork that numbed the emotional devastation. When Camilla finally emerged from isolation, she did so not with acceptance, but with strategy, contacting her advisors and friends with legal expertise to understand her options and rights. She learned that as queen consort her position existed only through Charles. Once he abdicated, she would retain the title of Queen Camilla as the widow equivalent of a former king, but would have no official responsibilities, no constitutional role, and no institutional platform. Everything she had built would collapse the moment he stepped down. Meanwhile, the machinery of constitutional transition had begun moving quietly behind the scenes. The Prime Minister was briefed in a private, unrecorded meeting at Downing Street, where officials adopted a carefully neutral stance. They knew continuity of the crown mattered more than any individual monarch, and a clean transition from father to son posed fewer risks than a prolonged decline of a sovereign unable to perform his duties. The Archbishop of Canterbury convened senior clergy to consider the theological and ceremonial implications. Charles's coronation had taken place just 2 years earlier in a grand ceremony broadcast worldwide, and repeating the full spectacle felt excessive. Yet William's accession still required formal recognition, prompting early discussions of a modified ceremony that honored the gravity of the moment without repeating the entire coronation pageant. Constitutional experts wrestled with unprecedented questions. What would Charles's title be after abdication? Would he remain a Councillor of State, or would that authority shift solely to working royals? Where would he live, given that sovereign residences would pass to William? How would financial arrangements work, since the sovereign grant covered only the reigning monarch and not a living former king? Each question led to new complications requiring resolution before any public statement could be made. At this stage, the palace communications team began shaping the narrative to accompany the announcement, crafting messaging that emphasized duty, continuity, and responsible stewardship rather than abandonment. Their drafts highlighted Charles's lifelong dedication to the crown, his determination to safeguard the monarchy's future by overseeing the transition while still capable, and his unwavering confidence in William's readiness to assume the throne. Every word of the public announcement was scrutinized for potential reaction, carefully adjusted to minimize shock, while remaining truthful about the medical realities driving Charles's decision. Security services conducted thorough assessments, recognizing that abdication would create a vulnerable period, a moment when established order was in flux and various groups might exploit uncertainty. Threats were analyzed, protection details revised, and contingencies planned for scenarios ranging from political protests to potential violence by extremists. The transition itself required a massive, multi-agency security operation, all developed in secret and ready to activate the moment the abdication became public. Beneath the logistical preparation lay a fundamental, unspoken question. Would the public accept this? Edward VIII's abdication had traumatized the nation, created a constitutional crisis, and left a permanent mark on the monarchy. Even a medically necessary abdication carried risks. Would people understand Charles's reasoning, or see it as weakness? Would they embrace William and Catherine as king and queen despite their relative youth? Or would resentment over Charles's abrupt departure undermine the transition? Carefully conducted public opinion research, designed not to reveal the true purpose, provided mixed signals that reassured no one. The decision was made to inform key family members before going public. Princess Anne was told first. Her practical nature and deep understanding of the institution made her feedback invaluable. She responded with support for Charles, tempered by concern for Camilla, whom she had come to respect despite a complicated history, and volunteered to help the Queen see this as medical necessity rather than betrayal. Prince Edward was informed next, reacting with sadness for his brother, but ultimately accepting the rationale, while his wife Sophie immediately considered how to guide Catherine through the transition. Understanding the younger woman would need mentorship from someone who had successfully navigated royal life. Prince Harry presented a unique challenge. Relations with the family remained strained despite occasional attempts at reconciliation. His position as son of the former king and brother of the incoming monarch meant he could not be left uninformed until the public announcement. The notification was handled with care, accompanied by assurances that his security concerns would be addressed in the transition planning, and that he would be welcome at any ceremonial events he chose to attend. His response, conveyed through intermediaries, expressed support for his father's decision, while maintaining distance from institutional matters. He would neither oppose the abdication nor participate in its planning or public advocacy. As the abdication plans progressed toward a tentative mid-December announcement, Camilla launched her own campaign to prevent, or at least delay, the transition. She began with appeals to Charles's sense of duty, reminding him of the sacred vows he had taken at his coronation and the promises to serve until death, arguing that medical treatment had advanced sufficiently that his condition might be manageable, and that stepping down so early would harm the very institution he claimed to protect. When these appeals to duty failed, she shifted to personal arguments, invoking their decades-long struggle to be together openly, the brief time they had served as king and queen, and the work she had invested to gain public acceptance and champion causes. Abdication, she insisted, would truncate all of that, reducing her role to a historical footnote and squandering the goodwill she had painstakingly built. Did he not owe her the chance to finish what she had begun? Torn between love for his wife and conviction that abdication was necessary, Charles attempted to present alternative paths. She could continue her charitable work independently, maintain patronages, and pursue public engagements as Queen Dowager, with resources and platforms potentially offering even more freedom than the constraints of a consort allowed. But Camilla dismissed these reassurances as hollow, insisting that Queen Dowager was a title for widows that emphasized loss rather than what remained. She had not fought for decades to be queen only to have the role stolen after 3 years. Her most potent weapon was emotional persuasion, deployed with intimate understanding of Charles's vulnerabilities. She wept over feeling abandoned, excluded from a decision that profoundly affected her, and powerless as she watched her influence and status slip away. Camilla's fury intensified as she grappled with the reality that her husband was surrendering the position he had been born to occupy. She questioned whether his medical team was being overly cautious, whether he was using health as an excuse to evade burdensome responsibilities, and whether he was sacrificing their partnership to smooth William's path to power. The accusations cut precisely because they contained slivers of uncomfortable truth that Charles could not entirely dismiss. She also began lobbying those who might influence him, appealing to Princess and to encourage Charles to resist pressure to abdicate. And, characteristically blunt, sympathized with Camilla, but emphasized that Charles's health had to take precedence over anyone's desires, including her own. Camilla reached out to longtime friends of Charles, hoping they would counsel him against abdication. Most responded with sympathy, but refused to interfere in so deeply personal a decision. Most controversially, she requested a private meeting with William at Clarence House, without Charles present. The encounter, later described as intensely uncomfortable, saw Camilla urging William to refuse the crown in order to compel his father to continue ruling, to prioritize Charles's emotional well-being over institutional convenience. William, maintaining respectful composure, explained that he could not shirk his constitutional duty any more than she could demand that his father continue in a role his health made unsustainable. Camilla left convinced that William was eager to become king, regardless of the cost to his father or stepmother. The campaign left Charles in an impossible position. He loved his wife deeply, understood her anger and disappointment, and longed to give her what she sought. Yet he could not ignore medical reality or subordinate constitutional responsibility to personal desire. The tension between these competing demands left him exhausted and miserable, visibly aging as stress compounded the very health issues that had prompted the abdication. The announcement finally came on December 10th, delivered in a televised address from Windsor Castle that interrupted regular programming across the nation. Charles sat alone at a desk, the setting deliberately intimate and personal rather than grand or ceremonial. His appearance startled viewers. He looked older than his 77 years, drawn and fatigued, the toll of the past months etched into his face. The toll of recent months was evident in Charles's face as he addressed the nation, his voice heavy with emotions barely contained. He began by expressing love for his country and gratitude for the privilege of serving as king, even briefly, acknowledging that his reign had been far shorter than anyone had anticipated or he had hoped. With unusual candor for royal communications, he detailed the medical realities that necessitated his decision, explaining that his condition required treatment incompatible with the demanding schedule and responsibilities of the monarchy, and that continuing would be irresponsible to the nation and unfair to the institution. He assured viewers that he had consulted widely and that, though painful, his decision was correct. Speaking with evident pride, he described William's preparation, dedication, and love for the nation, expressing confidence that William and Catherine would serve with distinction, and that the monarchy would be strengthened by the transition despite its unexpected timing. He asked the British people to support the new king and queen with the same loyalty shown to him and his mother, and his voice broke as he thanked Camilla for her partnership and patience during a decision that profoundly affected her. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media platforms crashed under traffic, news organizations scrambled to provide context, and constitutional experts were called to explain the next steps. Public reaction was complex and divided. Many sympathized with Charles's health struggles and admired his prioritization of the monarchy, while others felt cheated by the brevity of his reign or questioned whether abdication was truly necessary. Camilla was conspicuously absent from the announcement, her absence noted by all. Official statements said she was supporting her husband privately, though insiders knew she had refused to appear, unwilling to endorse a decision she saw as fundamentally wrong. In the days following, She maintained her public engagements but appeared diminished, lacking her usual energy and warmth. The transition period was set at 6 weeks, allowing for constitutional procedures and ceremonial preparation without unnecessary delay. William and Catherine underwent intensive briefings on constitutional duties, security protocols, international relations, and the vast details of modern monarchy, appearing overwhelmed but determined to assume roles they had expected to inherit decades later. Catherine, still recovering from her own health challenges, visibly struggled while maintaining public composure. The formal ceremony took place on January 25, 2026, as a solemn service of recognition at Westminster Abbey rather than a full coronation, attended by dignitaries and family, but stripped of the elaborate pageantry of Charles's own coronation. Charles participated, formally transferring authority to William in a moment heavy with symbolism and emotion. When he placed the crown on his son's head, both men wept, the personal pain overwhelming protocol and dignity. Camilla observed from the congregation, her face unreadable, concealing her inner turmoil. Afterward, Charles and Camilla retreated to a private estate in Scotland, away from public scrutiny, to rest and adjust. Yet the relationship remained strained. Camilla's anger persisted, and she continued to blame Charles and William for what she saw as an unnecessary surrender. Charles faced his own adjustment challenges, confronting an identity crisis after a lifetime of preparation and the fulfillment of a role he had finally attained, only to step away. No longer sovereign, no longer the final constitutional authority, no longer the figure everyone looked to for direction. He existed as a former king and individual without a defined purpose, weighed down by guilt over the pain his decision had caused Camilla and the disruption to William's family life. King William V's reign began under circumstances no one could have anticipated. At 43, he was young by monarchical standards, but burdened with responsibilities that would challenge someone decades older. Catherine, now queen consort, faced even steeper challenges, having expected years to recover her health and gradually transition into her role, only to be thrust immediately into the most visible position in the nation, while still fragile from illness and treatment. Their children faced dramatic adjustments as well. Prince George, at 12, became heir to the throne. Princess Charlotte, 10, and Prince Lou, 8, saw their lives transformed overnight. Security intensified, media attention escalated, and parental duties multiplied, making normalcy nearly impossible. William's early months were characterized by careful continuity, mixed with subtle reforms. He maintained most of his father's appointments and policies, while quietly pursuing a streamlined, future-focused monarchy, reducing the number of working royals, scrutinizing public spending, and emphasizing sustainability over traditions with no clear purpose. His relationship with Charles remained cordial but complicated. William sought his father's advice, and Charles offered guidance, yet an unspoken tension persisted. Charles struggled to see someone else occupy the role he had prepared for all his life and briefly held, while William felt guilt over benefiting from circumstances he neither desired nor created. Camilla's situation became increasingly difficult. As Queen Dowager, she retained some patronages and public duties, but her platform and resources were drastically diminished. No longer a central figure in national life, she became a historical footnote, her legacy defined by the brevity of her tenure and the manner of its ending, an unbearable reality. Living together in reduced circumstances, her relationship with Charles deteriorated. Without a shared public role to unite them, the partnership that had survived scandal and opposition faltered. Camilla could not forgive the abdication, and Charles, grappling with his own grief and identity crisis, lacked the emotional reserve to support her. They maintained appearances when required, but lived increasingly separate lives, each pained by watching William and Catherine succeed in roles they had barely begun to occupy. Public perception of the abdication evolved over time, with initial shock giving way to acceptance and growing recognition of Charles's selflessness. Yet Camilla remained convinced it had been unnecessary and premature. The subsequent stabilization of Charles's health only intensified her anger, as she argued the abdication had deprived them both of time to serve and solidify their legacy. 2 years later, Charles and Camilla quietly separated. A brief palace statement framed it as amicable, but those close knew the truth. Camilla could not forgive, and Charles could not endure the constant reminder of how his decision had destroyed her dreams. Charles spent his remaining years increasingly isolated, maintaining contact with his sons, pursuing scholarly work, and occasionally attending ceremonial events, but never fully regaining a sense of purpose or identity. When he died at 84, public mourning was genuine yet muted, reflecting the complexity of a monarch whose brief reign would always be overshadowed by its unprecedented end. Camila outlived him, continuing charitable work and nurturing her family, but never reconciled herself to the loss she had suffered. In her final years, when asked about her time as queen consort, she would simply say it had been too brief, a statement heavy with bitterness and regret, a lifetime of longing condensed into 3 years on the throne that could never be redeemed.